Youth mental health is in crisis. The National Alliance on Mental Illness statistics show 1 in every 5 teens has or will develop a serious mental illness, and that 50% of all lifelong cases are identifiable by age 14. In communities of color, childhood mental illness is less likely to be addressed and youth more likely to be dehumanized. I'm Dr. Jeff Gardier, and let's talk mental health in color. There's a lot going on with our youth as far as their mental health or lack thereof that we're really not addressing. In our community, the community of color, we don't talk about mental health challenges. We don't talk about PTSD. We don't talk about anxiety and some of the depression that I see in these places, because there's a stigma of people thinking that we are weak. Gun violence, well, it's surging in our cities, disproportionately hitting communities of color the hardest. CDC data shows young Black men and teens are 20 times more likely to be killed by gun violence than their white peers. We need to discuss that gun violence disproportionately affects our young Black men.
Right.
So Danny, you and several of your friends were shot. A survivor of the infamous Turnpike shooting. I believe you were around, about 19?
19 going on 20.
You were basketball bound, college bound, all of these big plans. How could gun violence affect someone who had it all together like you?
It was a very traumatic experience. I was shot 6 times. I still have a bullet in my stomach. It shattered my bones here, shattered this bone here. So I still have a metal plate here, metal plate here. I had gotten shot in my back, in my stomach, and my other arm. I was fighting for my life.
When you were being shot, almost execution or cold-blooded style, is that the way to say it?
Point blank range, yeah.
What were you experiencing, first physically, but also psychologically, if you could take yourself back?
It was very interesting because at the time, I was probably in the best physical shape of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was training. I was a month away from graduating junior college to go to a 4-year school. And I had just, I was getting older, so I was figuring out my body. All I know is as soon as I got shot, I went to a state of, shock. And for some seconds there, I just saw kind of my whole life flashing between my eyes,
So you thought you were gonna die?
I definitely thought I was gonna die, but it was weird because it was just all of a sudden I'm just thinking about all the hard work I had gone through, and immediately at first it was wow, I'm not gonna be able to play next month, and then it was like you say, I might not even make this.
You may not.
So
even
it was
live.
it was these emotions that it was first. It was wow, something. I can't believe this is happening, number one. And then it actually snapped me back to reality because I wasn't done. It was still, bullets flying around me. And in that moment, it was now I just switched into survival mode, and I just needed to pop myself out of that moment and get back into it.
And this is something that no person, but especially a young person, should have to ever experience at all.
Right.
But that's something you went through. How long did it take you to heal physically?
I was forced to do at least 2.5 years of physical therapy
But it ended your basketball career.
And then my basketball career, it took me about a year to be able to just write with my right hand. I'm right-handed. So, naturally, I wasn't able to shoot a basketball for like a year. And just physically, my arm just took a long time. I actually doing things for my arm now that the doctors originally said I was not going to be able to do.
But the emotional scars, those go on and on and on and on. Tell me emotionally, what has happened to you psychologically? Obviously a PTSD, but how have you experienced that yourself?
Psychologically, it was difficult because I was dealing with the new emotions of anger, frustration. When I realized, not only that I get shot, but I got shot by the police on my way to higher education. It was very confusing. You know what I mean? Because I thought that's something that would happen only in the hood.
You can be from the upper class, lower class, middle class, but it affects young Black boys. And that's important that they understand that.
Right. I had seen shootouts, about 3 or 4 of them in high school. So it was something that, I learned to, like, if we saw a shootout, we might talk about it 5 minutes and then that's it. We just keep moving. Like it became second nature.
But here's the thing, and I've worked with a lot of young people who did the same thing. They see the shootouts, they talk about it, they move on, but there is an invisible illness, right? That goes with that. And it's called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
It's not normal.
It's not normal for kids to have to go through that, what you went through, what you guys saw. How does that affect the community from your perspective?
Yeah, because it also puts it where you feel that you don't need to go outside and get help because you feel that's the norm and that's just the way things are, and they shouldn't be. And there's help out there, and sometimes especially the youth, they keep it inside, and when it comes out, sometimes it could come out very negative.
Right. Affects their relationships, it affects their academics and everything else. LGBTQ individuals are 2.5 times more likely to experience depression, anxiety, and substance misuse as compared with heterosexual individuals. Transgender individuals who identified as brown or Black are at increased risk of suicide attempts than their white transgender counterparts. Reducing stigma and judgments can drastically improve outcomes in communities of color. So, Ryder, I know that in your very short life, 15, right? That you've been through a lot, being that you've made or are making the transition from female to male.
Yes. I just have tough times because gender dysphoria is really hard, Then you feel like your brain is different than what your body should be.
Or you feel that you were born to the wrong
born
sex.
in the wrong body.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very hard because it's like what you are. But it's like the whole world is not seeing you as that. You feel the need to prove it on like a daily basis, and that can weigh a lot on you. For me at least, it's really hard because I get misgendered.
How about your mother? Was she supportive to you?
My mom wasn't supportive at first. Like, we had a really hard time for like a very long time, which I think it's on both of us. I wasn't as understanding because, I feel like a lot of trans kids, they have to understand that when they come out, it turns the whole world upside down because your parents expect, when they figure out your sex, when you're in the womb, they're like, oh, it's a boy or it's a girl. And they're thinking what your life's gonna be like. And when that's turned upside down, it's stressful for them. That's not an excuse to not support your child. But I think that I didn't understand that enough. But I also think that my mom could have been a bit better too.
Is she a bit better now?
Oh, she's way better. She's like she's like an advocate for me.
It is still a very anti-gay, anti-transgender, anti-LGBTQI world. It really is, even with all of the advances. How were you able to deal with that?
And I've definitely had like suicidal thoughts because a lot of times in my head I'll think like, oh, it'd be easier for some people if I was gone. Like easier on my parents because they wouldn't have to stress over my mental health.
But that's the way you feel at the moment.
That's the way I feel at the moment.
Have you gotten help? Mental health? treatment?
I have like off and on throughout the years. Not as much as I should, but we're working on that. But I've never tried to commit suicide, and I've never self-harmed. I saw on a poster, it was like, suicide is a permanent solution for temporary problems.
So you have to time travel a little bit.
You have to think about your future.
Your future and that of your family, and that you are not alone and you're never alone. What would be your advice for any young person going through the transition who's feeling suicidal or really thinking about hurting themselves? What could you say to them to pull them off that edge?
You don't understand how many people love you. I think if you think people don't care about you, it's untrue, because even if you don't really have a lot of friends, there's still someone that if they hear this person committed suicide, they're gonna be sad. It can be really, really, really hard sometimes, but I think that the saying is such a cliche, but it gets better, it really does.
And you, Ryder, keep doing what you're doing. We love you, we all support you. And let's support our kids and make sure that they get what they need to make it through whatever their situation is. Children experiencing environmental disasters are exposed to elevated levels of anxiety and depression, as well as chronic and severe mental health disorders. During disaster responses, mental health must be made as essential as physical health. Hurricane Michael, a devastating natural disaster. Where were you? What happened? Tell us about the experience.
When we first heard that a hurricane was coming, it was a Category 3, and it was going to Panama City Beach. We lived in Callaway, so we didn't really think that we would need to evacuate, because in the years that we've been there, every time a hurricane comes, it turns. It never hits Bay County. So
how far away was your location from Panama City?
we're about 15 miles from Panama City. We were across the bridge. So it was a good distance from where it was supposed to hit. So
you felt safe?
we did. We didn't even try to evacuate because we were like, it's going to hit the beach. We really didn't think it was going to be that bad.
Well, you didn't think it was going to be that bad.
Yes.
We thought that it wasn't going to be that serious either, because like my mom said, every time a hurricane was coming, we were like, oh, it's not going to be anything. It's going to just pass.
The news said, oh, it shifted again. It's no longer Category 3, it's now Category 4, and it's heading straight towards Bay County. By that time, it was too late. All the gas stations were out of gas. There was no water, there was no food, there was nothing.
Alyssa, I see you shaking your head. What were you guys thinking as this thing was coming towards you, this hurricane?
I don't know. It was really scary. When the wind and stuff started picking up, we're like, oh, this is serious.
We were in Callaway and the eye hit us. So we got the brunt of everything. Our roof came off and we were literally in the tub.
Wow.
Well, at this point, our next door house is in our house. Like the house next.
What do you mean?
There was a trailer park next to us.
And it went into your house?
The entire trailer came into our house while we were in there.
You and your husband?
We ended up in the bathroom in the tub, and he's kind of like laying on me. But if you look up, you can see the debris and you can see the things that are happening, but you literally had nowhere to go. So you just had to wait until either you die or the storm ends.
So at this point, you must have been afraid for your own lives. Were you?
I was. So after it cleared up, we walked. We walked for 4 hours to get to them. So when you're walking, you're hearing people in their apartments screaming for help because they can't get out. But you can't go in because there are power lines there. There's glass there. You have to climb over trees. You literally see the roots of trees, but majority of them were snatched up by their roots. There's parts of cars and parts of houses. Like, it no longer looked like Panama City. It looked like a war zone. Well, at this point, we didn't know who was alive or dead. We walked for 4 hours to get to them. And when I first got to them, they were so surprised. And everyone just started crying because they're like, you're here. You made it here. But then it's like, now that we're all together, now what? Like, we can't use an ATM. We can't call for help.
This is a major trauma for your family.
When you go through things like this, we're not asking for you to hand us out something. The whole city is blacked out. You can't drive. So what can we do besides sit here and hope that someone comes to help us? The police came and they told us that, you know, there are power lines that are down and that we couldn't leave our house. You have to stay in your house. They put a curfew. When the sun starts going down, if you're out, you're going to jail. The jail didn't have power. There was no judges. So you're gonna sit in jail until they decide to let you out.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that while you were all going through this horrifying situation for days, that you really didn't get the support that you needed.
People have this impression that if you apply for FEMA or apply for Red Cross, that they'll come in instantly and they'll fix the day. No, we had to live outside of our house in a tent, and we had to cook on like a barrel outside. They put us in a hotel, and then every month we had to fight for an extension, but they kept moving us. First we're gonna be here, then we're gonna be here. Okay, now we're out of funding, so now you can't stay. Then the hotel tells us everybody has to get out. You can't stay here.
They put you out?
They kicked everybody out. You can't stay here. You have to leave.
They said it was too dangerous.
It's too dangerous for us to stay, so you have to leave.
So where did you all go?
We walked.
Took a walk. We have where to go.
There are many lessons for us here, but I think the most important lesson is that this family is really suffering. And it's really important that we address the mental health issues of each and every family member. Suicide rates of Black children between ages 5 through 12 are almost twice as high as compared to whites. Suicide among Black boys is increasing at alarming rates, but continually being ignored by our society.
I'm a father to a child who's, I would say, a borderline schizophrenic now. And, you know, unfortunately, my son's tried to commit suicide a few times.
How old is he?
He's 16 now. He's 16. Thankfully, he hasn't been successful.
And he's on the road to recovery, I would
He's been in long-term care.
Yeah, good.
Several times.
Good.
We go to therapy a lot.
And so you're part of that process with
Absolutely,
him.
absolutely.
And you got him the help early on.
Yes.
And the earlier the better that we get to our kids when it comes to their mental hygiene.
Yeah.
I have to admire you because you're doing something which is really important. You're throwing it out there that your child is a borderline schizophrenic. And I can tell you there are a lot of parents, not only would they not talk about this, right? Because they see it as a weakness within the family. Come on, let's be real. Sometimes we don't talk about this to the detriment of our own children, who then, if we don't model for them the importance of good mental hygiene, that in fact, they're not going to pursue that, or we don't pursue it for them. And we're in denial, oh, not my child, but it is our children.
Yeah.
Great job, Geronimo. In communities of color, at very young ages, boys are taught toxic masculinity. Rather than be met with compassion and offered emotional coping tools, our boys are too often molded to ignore their vulnerability. To reduce stigma and judgment, our boys must be nurtured to share rather than suppress their emotions, and this must become commonplace in their lives.
As far as my childhood, growing up in a Hispanic household, it was from the very beginning, you're a man. You know, you're not treated as a boy, you're a man. We never spoke about feelings, you know, we never discussed any issues, any major events, any kind of tragic events that would happen in our lives. We just, you know, our parents always instilled in us that, you know, you're a man, you have to just ball it up, suck it up, and keep moving forward, you know.
Right.
You know, Black parents, Hispanic parents, we tend to be too tough on them sometimes, you know. We expect them to be men immediately, and we forget that they're just kids. We forget how we felt when we were younger, because a lot of times our kids will tell us, I'm fine, I'm great, everything's perfect. You see them on social media, they're happy, but a lot of times they're hiding behind the
What's
happiness.
going on internally.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So, and that's the only way I found out about my child. I kept pushing until one day I broke through, and he's like, you know, this is exactly how I'm feeling. this is what I'm planning to do. I want to end my life. And if I wouldn't keep going, it could have been worse.
So, Donald, talking about this whole idea that we're shutting down, the feelings of our kids, what did that do to you coming up? And why do you think it's important that we should allow our children, our boys especially, to express their emotions?
Going back to, my early childhood, we had a family business and kind of jumped in that business early on, and just kind of having to, grow up too early and not have that childhood. At that point, I no longer was family. I was more of a worker. We all were pretty much required to work on it. But it was, it's like lumberjack type tree stuff, but.
Really? Lumberjacks, trees?
Yeah.
Were you all the only black families doing that? Oh,
Probably so. It was kind of like a family business handed down, from, grandfather to father. And it's a rough business. The attitude, the mentality came with it. You're just a worker, and we're going to talk to you how, we want. So
what I hear you saying is there wasn't much sensitivity there, or addressing whatever conflicts as a youngster that you were going through, or talking about the importance of mental hygiene, right? Having that clean mind, that healthy mind to help you through.
I didn't have that relationship that I needed to have with my father. I just had, weekend work, and that's it. As an individual building myself, it was rough because I think it made me a lot more self-reliant. I don't put a lot of faith or trust into anyone else. It's hard to create, friendship.
Black women are experiencing an overwhelming mental health crisis while also being underserved. Girls of color experience higher rates of adversity than their white peers, resulting in toxic stress. Negative societal stigma, discrimination, and sexism contribute to the unique stresses faced by Black women and girls, which are often misunderstood and misdiagnosed by healthcare providers. Unrealistic stereotypes of the strong Black woman must be addressed in order to erase negative psychological outcomes. Bridget, what was your experience?
Well, for me, I grew up an only child in a military family. So a lot of things that I dealt with, I didn't have the siblings to talk to. And with me being the oldest grandchild on both sides, it was kind of like, a lot of things I had to figure out on my own. With my own children, I went through a divorce, which they went through with me. But because I had a military background and upbringing, I understood the importance of counseling. And so I had the counselor to actually come into the home when I was going through my divorce.
A woman ahead of your time. You had that counselor coming in to address the needs of your children.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
And being that I came from the military, I wasn't ashamed of counseling. It was during a time where I was voluntold to deploy, as a federal employee.
I love that, voluntold.
Voluntold is the term that I use because I definitely did not volunteer. And so it was during a time, going through the divorce, getting orders to deploy to Afghanistan, and then try to keep my children together and, sign them over to my mother. So it was, the therapist coming into the home really did help in that aspect. And then, following up with the counseling, because once I came back from Afghanistan, I wasn't the same.
My experience catapulted me into helping others, because I was then told you have to be the helper,
Right.
And at first you judge yourself when you have experiences with anxiety and panic attacks and depression.
And hypochondriasis.
And all of that, right? Because I've had everything from SARS to prostate cancer, if you'd ask me, right? And I don't even have a prostate. So
she thinks, right, that's it.
So
Right.
it's like,
it's like my going back and checking my stove
That's
to
it.
make sure the gas is turned
That's
off,
it.
that
That's
OCD,
it. That's
and
it.
then realizing I have an electric stove.
Yeah.
But
what I discovered,
you missed that, guys.
What
Go ahead.
I discovered in that was, thanks to my mom, is to learn how to be a safe place for people, right? Even if we don't understand what's happening or can't relate to what's happening, if there's a safe place, then you will at least start the conversation.
Especially for our kids.
And exactly. And then when you start the conversation is when you start the healing, right? Because then you start to learn about each other and what you're experiencing, and you may recognize something that looks a little different. And then you can start to see that in other people, which then brings us back to our connectivity. As a coach, someone that coaches around anxiety and depression. And at first I was afraid to do that because I too suffer from, from these things. But, someone once told me a story about a man that was stuck in a pit, because you feel like that sometimes when you're like, there's no way to get out, and all these people are walking by trying to help, and they're throwing stuff down there. And then someone jumps into the pit, right? And you're like, you idiot, now we're both stuck.
Right.
And he says,
Exactly.
no, I've been here before and I know the way out.
Yeah.
So that story motivated me to be the way out for other people. So I may not be able to help with everything, but I can help with what I've been through.
And you're concentrating on helping those children now.
Absolutely.
So that there's not a pattern, a skewed pattern later on as they grow up.
Yes, for sure.
Parents' behaviors and maltreatment greatly impact the long-term mental health of their children. Those who are unsupportive and minimize or even ignore their children's feelings tend to hamper their ability to have a positive sense of self. I know this really hurts for you to talk about it, so first of all, I salute you for being so brave. I thought it would be important to talk about some of those things that have challenged your mental wellness and how being trans might somehow make those situations more difficult for you.
My dad was like emotionally abusive, like majorly. And I was with him for like a good part of my life, probably until I was like 11, 12.
So starting at around what age was he emotionally abusive?
He's been emotionally abusive for as long as I can remember. He was like really fake in public. And then when we got home, it's like if I did one small thing, he would like yell at me. And he talks for so long. He would talk for hours and hours of the same thing.
I mean, those are the tender years, right?
Yeah.
Right up till age of 11 or 12 that he's saying these things, being emotionally abusive.
I was just so conflicted when I was younger between like, I guess the sides of like my mom versus my dad. Like I didn't like my dad, but I also had love for him as like him, he's my father, and I still have love for him as my father. He would get angry about the smallest things, and that was really hard for me because it's like as a kid you make mistakes, you do like stupid stuff, He would just get so mad at me over and over. He'd say a bunch of bad things about my mom, and then if I did one thing that was like a small thing, small little mess up, he'd be like, "You're just like your mother," and it's like that's really mean because you're just saying all these bad things about your mom and about my mom, and then you're saying that like I'm like that.
How did that affect your mental health? Did you feel depressed?
I don't know. It's just hard, and I was very sensitive. I was sad a lot. I cried so much when I was younger. And as I've gotten older, it's like affected my self-esteem because of how mean he was to me.
I understand that the self-esteem issues, but that constant screaming and the emotional abuse, how did that impact you growing up?
I feel like a lot of my issues didn't hit me until teenage years. Like when I was younger, it's just I had to deal with it. Like, this is my life. I'm just doing this, and I didn't really have the grasp on exactly like what was the problem. But then as I got into my teenage years, it started to affect me like in more emotional ways, being depressed, like thinking I'm not good enough, that I'm worthless, that sort of thing.
We've got to pay attention to the pain of our children. So Alana, I know you don't talk a lot, but I do see the tears welling up in your eyes. I know there are things that you want to say to your mother. Even though your mother is hearing right now everything you guys are going through, everything you experienced, do you think that your mother is really aware of what is going on with you guys as far as this emotional pain?
No.
Does she include you guys in trying to help with the healing process?
I don't think it goes like that for anybody with a family.
Well, tell your mom.
I feel like when stuff happens to a family in general, it's a line between what the adults have to go through and what the kids have to go through. And the adults automatically assumes that, oh, they're going through different things because I pay bills, I go to work. It's not anything that is shared. It's a shared thing, but we don't share it.
So you feel that you guys suffer as much as your parents, but your parents are not really aware of that. They feel that their suffering is different or even more because they have all these other responsibilities.
Yes.
So, Mom, do you hear that?
Yeah, and I mean, it's true.
But I mean, don't take it as a criticism.
No,
it's something all parents should understand, that our kids suffer as much, if not more, than we do.
I didn't think of that. Like, she says that, and it's like, I immediately jumped into, okay, don't worry about it. Mommy's gonna fix this. Mommy's gonna find us a place to stay. Mommy's gonna find everybody clothes. Mommy's gonna do this. Everybody's fine. You don't take the time to say, how are you? How are you handling this? Because there's so many things that you have to put in a row that, unfortunately, and it's sad to say, I did this, that their emotions become on the back burner. Because now I have to make sure that we have a home. I have to make sure that you're fed. I have to make sure that all of these things are done, that I'm not tending to your emotions. I'm not asking you. I know how I feel, and I know the devastation that I went through, but because of what I went through, I felt like I was shielding them. Like, I'm gonna fix this so you don't have to experience what I'm going through. You don't have to.
So really the bottom line is, you did nothing wrong, but there are things as adults, because, you know, out of the mouths of babes and children come pearls of wisdom, which is, we've got to pay attention. We've got to pay attention to the pain of our children. We need to spend, and again, you did nothing wrong, but we need to spend less time shielding them and more time understanding that we can't always shield them, and how to deal with life on life's terms, especially through these traumas, how we help them through. Post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD, is commonly associated with military personnel. However, non-combat PTSD can also develop as a result of everyday experiences. Toxic stress that leads to disrupted physiological functioning are much more prevalent in children of color due to their greater exposure to traumatic events. Well, it sounds like what you guys are going through is called post-traumatic stress disorder. And that is when you've been affected by a trauma, or there are different traumas that are happening. It affects you in a way where you have sometimes nightmares, sleep issues, appetite issues. You don't want to think about what happened. You even begin avoiding situations that remind you of what you went through. Have you experienced any of that?
Yeah.
What else were you experiencing? What else did you feel emotionally? Did you have nightmares after this? Did you have bad dreams?
My sleep pattern, it got messed up.
So you had issues with sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Every time it rains, we're all in the same room. Every time there's lightning, there's thunder.
So if you're in different parts of a particular place, when it starts raining, lightning, thunder, what happens?
She comes to my room.
You talked about the lightning, the thunder, you guys come in together. Why? Because you're afraid?
Yes.
What are you afraid may happen when you hear lightning and thunder?
We're all scared. You never know what's gonna happen. You literally never know anymore. I have panic attacks. She has panic attacks. She just starts crying.
When you watch TV and you see these hurricanes affecting other places, other states, other countries, do you feel a certain way about that? Does that bring back any memories of what you went to?
I cry. I cry because I can understand. Like, I can understand what Puerto Rico went through now. They're begging for help, begging for help. Even now, if you drive through Panama City, you will see there's no help. I still have friends living in tents. Their old teacher, she's still living in a tent, but she's still going to work every day. You can't imagine.
This is a major trauma for your family, and it continues to be traumatizing.
We moved to Tuskegee. We were there, 2 weeks before the tornado hit the county that we're in that killed all those people? It was like, as soon as we moved there, then here comes a tornado that's coming through the same county, another natural disaster.
So then what's happening is you're saying that you were re-traumatized again.
Yeah.
How does this keep happening to one family?
That's what we keep wondering.
Would you say this was maybe the worst experience you've ever had in your lives?
Oh my God, yeah.
The scariest experience?
The most heartbreaking.
The most heartbreaking. Why the most heartbreaking?
Because
Tell us about that, Alyssa.
we've lived in Panama City since I was in elementary school, and now I'm about to be out of high school. So walking through the streets and seeing everything ruined was really upsetting.
She missed prom. She's missing everything because it's not her home. Those aren't her friends.
Aaliyah, can you tell us what's going on in your mind?
I miss Panama City.
What do you miss?
I miss my friends, my teachers. I miss everything.
It really turned your life upside down, right?
Yes.
Alex, what were you guys thinking when all of this was going on? You're separated from your mom and you know this devastation is going on.
We were worried about her because the hurricane was strong, really strong.
I could see that in your eyes right now, even thinking about it. How about you, Elijah? Do you miss your friends too?
Elijah stopped talking. Elijah is now in a shell.
So he doesn't talk about this at all.
No. Or he gets angry when you want to talk about it. Everyone is so different.
They're all affected in a different way.
Yeah.
How about Alana? Alana, how about you? You haven't said that much.
Alana, she's not herself. She's quiet. They're standoffish. She literally, in my opinion, has just completely given up. She doesn't care anymore.
How has that experience been for you? What have you experienced since? What are some of the emotional things you've been going through?
Well, nothing much, because I usually don't really cry that often or talk that often. I just see a lot of things happen to them most of the time. So nothing really.
But do you sometimes feel some anxiety or nervousness when you see all of these things happening in your family?
But I'm always nervous when they're doing stuff like that.
Because you're not talking about this. There's something that's called transference, countertransference, where we pick up emotions from our patients that we work with. Listening to their stories, we almost can place ourselves there. And I'm breathing a little hard just thinking about, Alex thought he might never see his mom and dad again. You guys were like, what's going on? There's no communication. Do you kind of feel like discussing this now, this kind of takes you back there to some extent?
It does.
Aaliyah, are you okay?
No.
What are you feeling, sweetheart?
I'm feeling sadness because I don't like to talk about this.
No one wants to talk about the big elephant in the room.
You're dealing with some other things too, aren't you? Some other traumas in your life. You were in the military at one point.
I had to get out because I have lupus.
So you're dealing with now these physiological issues. How difficult does that make it for your healing through what this family's going through?
When I get so overwhelmed, my lupus flares, and when my lupus flares, I pass out. I just hit the floor. I can't tell you how many times they have found me and had to call 911 because I'm passed out, or I'm in the hospital for days at a time and they're so worried because they don't know when I'm coming back. And it's like they tell you, you need to calm down, don't stress.
And how do you do that when you're dealing with the stress of what happened with the hurricane, being homeless, and so on? And kids, when you see your mom passed out on the floor like that, what goes through your minds?
I'm scared each time because one time in the past she passed out and she lost her memory for a bit. So I'm scared that'll end up happening again. She neglects her health and tries to overwork herself. And then when I express my care for it, she's like, no, I'm fine. And I'm like, no, you're not fine. I keep telling her that it's okay for her to calm down for a little bit, that we're not gonna die without her.
Would you tell her that?
We're not gonna die without you. You can calm down.
I understand that, but we have
No,
so much rebuilding.
We do, but you have lupus and you neglect your health a lot.
Your kids are telling you They need for you to stay alive in order to keep them alive. Is that right, Alex? Look at your babies crying. Your kids are in pain. Stop sacrificing yourself to the point of where you may not be there for them. You've got to take care of yourself. What I hear is, hey, the kids are all right. Well, let me tell you, let's not take for granted what our kids are going through, because they're not as resilient as you think. There certainly are very clear signs that they also have mental health struggles. And notice I didn't say mental illness, I said mental health struggles. You see, we do ourselves a disservice when we don't work with them around their hidden struggles or even open conflicts. But even as a prophylactic, as a preventative measure, helping them to be strong by talking with them about the importance of a positive mental attitude, dealing with possible anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and giving them the tools to cope is a gift to them that just keeps on giving and helps build a resilience in them that we want them to have always.
I myself was diagnosed with PTSD, chronic PTSD, and another thing about me is that I'm from Panama City, Florida.
Wow.
I really got emotional listening to Ty and her children speak, because I went in 3 days after the storm. And to see home the way that I saw it, having been to a third world country, it again triggered something, but I learned coping skills. That was the difference.
So what's the importance of the coping skills that you learned?
I wasn't ashamed of counseling. It wasn't one of those things to where, what goes on in the home stays in the home. That's one of the things that I think as African-American families, we get told a lot, and that's a part of our upbringing.
That's right. We just take it to the church and so on, but God helps those who help themselves. And dealing with your PTSD, what was the importance of dealing with your kids in preparing them for what you were going through, for the hurricane, for what they were dealing with in their lives in general?
The biggest thing was being able to identify. Everyone is different. Everyone is gonna respond and react in a different manner. So I had to make sure that I paid close attention to, how they changed in behaviors because of the separation.
Important, especially for our kids.
PTSD is not just a condition that is affiliated with being a service member or being in the military.
That's right. And thank you for bringing that out.
It is something that goes beyond those walls.
And as we see with our kids experiencing that.
Exactly. And we were in Lowe's, and it started thundering and lightning. And to see the reaction from those children, I knew instantly what it was. To see those parents trying to console their kids when it was thundering and lightning.
And the kids didn't even know what it was they were experiencing.
Had no clue.
And that's where we as parents really need to step up to educate our kids.
I think that when we have natural disasters on an insurance term and medical basis, that's one of the things that is definitely needed. Because when you get caught up in looking at what does my insurance cover, what does it not cover, mental health is one of those things that should be an automatic.
Absolutely, and let's make it an automatic for our kids, right? As part of growing up, not just reactive, but something that is proactive, okay? And the earlier we get to whatever their issues are and letting them know that it's okay to go to therapy. It's all right to have emotions, right, Donald?
Right.
It's all right to cry. Until we do that, our kids will continue to suffer. So Danny, it's important that young people, especially when it comes to gun violence, being victims of gun violence, experiencing it, get therapy. So did you have the nightmares? Did you have the intrusive thoughts? Were there any triggers that threw you back into that PTSD?
It was difficult because I was dealing with the new emotions of anger, frustration. It was certain moments I just had to catch myself when I'm realized that I'm maybe getting myself angry around family and friends for no reason. So it was those moments. Not everybody deals with it different.
Were you able to get help?
I told my family I didn't need it, and
do you really think you didn't need it?
I probably did need it at the time. I mean, I got physical help, but I always had a lot of love in my household.
Right. So
You
you
know,
had the support.
Yeah, and I do realize that I did something very early, because that first year I couldn't write. I started just kind of putting my whole life together, and when I finally was able to write, and I think that helped me, you know,
So that was
getting
in
all
some
my
ways
thoughts out.
that was your own mental health therapy.
Being that I went that route within the first months, I really had to think about everything. So I really wrote everything out and rewrote it and put it out. Maybe not to a stranger, but to myself.
Well, that was the way you
But in some
did
ways,
it.
somehow, everybody deals with it different. Some of the other guys that was in the incident with me really needed to get psychological help, and were very angry. One of my guys, Ray Sean, my brother, he really stood to himself pretty much for like that first year. I hardly see him, and his family spoke on that he really didn't want to do anything until finally he kind of snapped out of it, got some help.
What would you advise young people today?
If you're not doing something creative like that, or you're getting your information out, you definitely need help.
Interestingly enough, I don't know if we can get a shot on that. Hold up that sock there with the scream, right? Was that what your life was like growing up, that angst?
It can be really, really, really hard sometimes, I know. But I think that the saying is such a cliche, but it gets better. It really does, because once you're out of your house, once you've gotten your own freedom, you can decide the people that you hang out with. You don't have to have negative people around you. You can be around positive people that are going to support you and lift you up.
Alana, how about you? You haven't said that much. You experience too, but you're not able to talk about it. Where do those emotions go when you don't talk about things?
To music. I like to listen to music. So when I listen to music, I feel better. But I'm always nervous when they're doing stuff like that.
Because you're not talking about this. But music is good. Anything that helps you is good. Alyssa, what do?
I read or write.
And that helps you through. How about the rest of you? Is there anything that helps you with this trauma that you're experiencing?
I create comic books.
I try to draw pictures. I color.
I wear a mask to make sure that they're okay.
But that's not really helping them. You're the model. You're the role model. They're engaging in things like art therapy on their own. Is there any family therapy going on? Have you guys talked to a therapist? Is this the first time? FEMA didn't offer you therapy?
No therapy.
They take care of the physical needs to some extent?
To some extent.
The medical needs are taken care of to some extent?
No, they do no medical. We had to pay out of pocket.
And no psychological counseling?
FEMA needs more training. They don't understand what it's like to wait. We woke up on the 9th. It was a wonderful day, nice and sunny. And then on the 10th to lose everything.
We have to start looking at the healing. And as part of that, something that you said, which is very, very fascinating, is that you guys don't talk about this. You guys don't talk about it. And you have to talk about it. And I know it's painful, but you can't hold on to that pain inside. And that's why you're feeling this pain now, but the pain has to come out. Do you agree? So I would like to see you guys talk about this more. I really want you guys to have family discussions. Discuss it, because you can offer them the support. And so getting therapy, you can go to a neighborhood clinic, you can go to a hospital, and they have psychiatric interns and people who need training, and therefore they'll work and treat you for free. There are hotlines. It's important that if you've experienced this kind of trauma, or any kind of trauma, or experiencing any kind of mental health challenge, that you talk about it. So Ty, one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do is once a week or twice a week, have a family meeting and just talk about what we're talking about here. Continue the communications with your family, because the stress, the depression, the anxiety, the PTSD, that is festering inside of them. Again, we have to break this hole that we put on ourselves, that addressing mental health issues, the stigma that we're weak. You guys are the strongest people I have ever met in my life. So let's take that strength to a place of health, mental health. We're gonna do this?
Try my hardest.
All right, Ty. Do we love mommy?
We love you.
I love you too. You need a hug.
Give her a hug. This is Dr. Jeff, and let's continue to talk about mental health in color. So there are many, many ways to deal with mental health issues and challenges for adults, and especially for youngsters like yourselves. There's exercise, there's journaling, there's mindfulness, there's proper nutrition, there's communicating to one another, there are support groups, there's therapy, but there's also something that's really, really just incredible and has been proven scientifically to help bring about better mental wellness. Yes. And we call it, Rochelle?
We call it meditation.
Meditation.
Meditation. I mean, I'm going to help you today, right? But it's something that you can do on your own. So what I'm going to do today is just show you a couple of really easy meditations that can help you. The first one is a 3-part breathing. Really good for anger, for fear, to just get you grounded in the space.
For anxiety.
For anxiety.
The issue of the times for
absolutely.
Our young people, anxiety.
When meditating, we breathe in through our nose and we breathe out through our mouth. Eyes closed. I just want you guys to relax. Go back straight up, because you always want the energy to move through the body without interruption. Relax. This is a safe place. Everybody here loves you. And we want what's best for you. Right? So slowly bring to mind the thing that you want to manifest in your life. Right? Whether you're on the beach or you're on a stage singing your music, I want you to use all of your senses. What does the beach sound like? I want you to hear it. Hear the waves, the birds, the wife. Right? Hear your music. Hear the people appreciating your music. Feel it, the joy. Breathe it in. The more we see it, the more we can manifest it. And just relax. Release any tension. It's been a day, right? So just release all that tension in the neck, shoulders. Just let it out. Breathe it out. In through the nose, out through the mouth. All the way down the body. Don't force it, just let it flow. And with your next breath in, take a deep, deep breath in. And let's release it with a sigh. There you go. Put your hand over your heart for me. Your blood is pumping through your body for a reason. And as long as you have that, anything can change, anything's possible, and even probable if you're on board with it.
Keeping your hand on your heart
Feel it.
lets you know that you're part of the world. Feel your heartbeat. It forces you to breathe.
Yes.
You
On
know?
purpose,
Because
right?
if we don't breathe, we die.
We die.
Thank you, Rochelle.
You're welcome.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Yeah.